introductions? Probably not. So we'll just pass that over and continue working House Bill 2086. We got 7 amendments completed yesterday, and I think we've got number 8 on tap. And so I'll have Jason pass them out, and we'll take a look at it. Thank you, sir. By the way, Senator Holscher is caught in that big traffic jam, so she's on the way, and I think so Senator Straub, so hopefully, and Faustido too. Jason, if you want to explain this, looks pretty simple.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is an amendment in the bill dealing with the permanent advance voting list. These are individuals who have signed up to be on the permanent advance voting list, so they always get an advance voting ballot. Under current law, if a person fails to vote in 4 consecutive general elections, then the officer would mail notice to the voter, inform them that their name will be removed from the permanent advance voting list unless they renew their application within 30 days. The bill, as introduced, had reduced that from 4 consecutive general elections to 2. The House Elections Committee had moved it back to 4. This balloon moves it back to 2. And those general elections are each year, and so it would be 2 consecutive years of missing the general election, and then notice would be sent, and then the voter has 30 days to renew their application to stay on the permanent advance voting list.
Any questions for Jason, committee? Senator Reichman.
Thank you. Would you define general election? Thank you.
Yes, the general election is the one, actually the language in the bill does define general election as the one held on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November. No, it's both an even and odd numbered years.
So basically 2 years. And any other questions on this amendment? Senator Straub, did you catch what we were doing here on amendment number 8 yet? Basically, what it's on page 25 on the back, it moved the advanced voting list. It fails to vote in 2 consecutive general elections, so basically 2 years in November. Then they are, county election officer may contact them and pull them from the rolls if they don't respond, I believe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this in federal law that stipulates at all? Okay.
Any other questions? Any discussion? Do I hear a motion on this? We have a motion from Senator Clues to move out this amendment. And do I have a second? Second by Senator Blasey. Any discussion? I do know that the House went to 4. There's some, obviously we can wrestle the House in conference over this one, since this is probably the only change we made that the House hasn't, since they voted it out 122 to nothing. So any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. That is passed. And we move on. Are there other amendments? Senator Blasey.
Let's go 100,000. So section 9 of the bill, as he's passing those out, we'll start
Section
there.
9. Thank you, sir. You want to explain it or have Jason do so?
I'll do my first attempt and he can fix all my mistakes. But section 9, it looks like we're trying to move 100,000 to 130,000. I think it's because maybe there's some discrepancies in the law. However, 130 just seems so arbitrary, so I just have a motion or amendment to just keep it at 100,000. And Sheila, do you have a copy for me? I don't think I have a copy in front of me. Thank you. So election commissioners would be appointed in counties with 100,000 people or more.
Committee, or any questions for the maker of the amendment? Senator Clues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm not following what you're thoughts were on that.
Jason, you can probably explain more eloquently.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, in statute, there's a population threshold for having a election commissioner appointed as opposed to electing a county election officer. And under one statute, 19-3419, that population figure is 130,000 currently. The bill was amending another statute in that act, 19-3422, to change that to 130,000. So the population thresholds would be the same under those two statutes, so there would not be a conflict. The balloon amendment you see makes them the same, but keeps it at 100,000, which is the number that's in Section 9 of the bill under current law. So the threshold under the balloon for having an election commissioner appointed would be 100,000 population in the county.
Thank you, Senator Longmire.
Do we know how many election commissioners this may add by moving it back from 130 to 100?
I think one.
Yeah, one.
I think Douglas County, correct?
Are there others that are close?
Secretary of State's office, Brian Caskey, can answer that, I think.
I haven't looked very recently, but Douglas County is over 100,000. The next closest are probably Leavenworth, Butler, and Riley. They're in the ballpark of 80-ish thousand. But honestly, I haven't looked in a few years.
Does that, Brian, does that go off the current census data, so it's updated every, 10 years or so?
Our office uses the official decennial census numbers. The state of Kansas also publishes census estimates every year. Every July 1, they do census estimates. So that is a piece of knowledge that we have. But there's not been a new commissioner added in my lifetime, frankly. So just that's what's out there. We've not used either one of those.
Any other discussion? Senator Reichman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And quickly, what does the election commissioner do?
Mr. Chairman, the election commissioner serves as the chief election official for the county, the same as the elected county clerk and other counties that elect their election officer, their chief election officer.
Senator Blasey.
In Sedgwick County, we have an election commissioner, and it's worked out great. They're nonpartisan. They're just people who want to ensure that we have fair elections, and they more or less handle it instead of having an elected position do it. Thank you.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What was the motivation to change it to 130? If someone from the Secretary of State's office could answer.
Yeah, Clay Barker, if you want to.
Senator, the motivation was there were 3 different statutes that actually had 3 different population cutoffs, and we did 130 because that was the most recent change in the legislature. We thought it represented the legislature's will. But our only goal there was to make it consistent across the statute, not to change the number.
Any other discussion?
My fault. You want me to repeat that?
Oh.
I had the mic.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, for the record.
Apologize, Senator Straub. Stayed up too late last night. We noticed that there were 3 different population cutoffs in statutes, so we took 130,000 because that was the most recent number adopted by the legislature, and it was also the key statute. We only wanted consistency. The number itself is a policy decision for the legislature to make.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, do you want to move your amendment, or do you have another question, Senator Reichman? Okay. We have a motion by Senator Blasey, a second by Senator Reichman. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The motion carries. And any further amendments?
Let's go to
Senator Blasey.
Let's go to section 58 of the bill. I think it's the second page. And this might be a question for the Secretary of State's office. I think it's page 48. Each precinct committee man and committee woman shall report any changes in such person's name, address, email address, and phone numbers to the county election officer not later than 10 days after such change. I guess my question is there a consequence if someone does not report their change? I understand why that's probably in here. However, it's just and the people have very busy lives, and we have hundreds and hundreds of precinct people. I'm just curious how many people actually know they need to do that and follow it, and just didn't know if there was a consequence. I don't see one in the statute book or this bill, but just curious.
What page? I'm sorry, Jason. Page, top of 48, okay.
Lines 14 through 17.
Okay, I see it now.
48.
Okay, Jason, go ahead.
I think Mr. Caskey has.
Oh, okay, Brian, if you'd like to. Sorry about that.
Not a problem, Senator. Senator Blasey, there is no consequence if that is not followed. County election officers receive the information, and they just publish what they receive. There's no consequence if there is not.
Any further questions or amendments? Senator Fasquedo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So is this amendment regarding the disability, or what is this that you were just?
Oh, we were just discussing section 58, and this was just regarding precinct committee and committee women on that particular one. So no amendments before us right now. Any further discussion or amendments? I think there's, Senator Straub, did you have discussion or amendment? Okay. Senator Blasey? Nope, you're good?
I was just asking for clarity on that section, but
Okay.
if you want to proceed, you go to section 8 of the bill.
Okay.
This is the residency requirements for an election commissioner. It's my understanding this was put in there to ensure that someone has some experience or more qualified to be the election commissioner. However, I have great concern that removing the residency requirement for, which would be on page 4, line 25 through 27, which current law says such election commissioner shall have been a qualified elector and a resident of the county at least 2 years prior to appointment. I think removing that is very tricky. The last thing we want in Sedgwick County is someone from Johnson or Shawnee County running our elections here in Wichita. They don't know our community, and so I would move that we strike. I'm trying to see what's in the first part of that section. If we strike the whole section, or if we just strike the lines that have been added on lines 31 through 33, we're saying that the election commissioner can just declare residency after 6 months of appointment. Again, I think that defeats the purpose. I think we're having people who don't know our community run our elections.
That would be a conceptual amendment then. Let's make sure, Jason.
Restate your amendment.
Well, I guess my question is real quick for the revisor. On lines 13 through 16, is that necessary, or is that another cleanup that needs to stay in there, or is that pertaining to actual what's in the section on the lower end, which is residency requirements? Otherwise, I would just strike the whole section, unless you think we need to keep the top part about population.
The balloon that was just adopted changes that 130,000 number in line 13 to 100,000. So you would want to keep section 8 to amend that population threshold that was just adopted.
Then my motion will be to strike lines 31 through 33, where it says, within 6 months after taking the oath of office, the newly appointed election commissioner shall become a qualified elector of the same county, and put back in lines 25 through 27, which is current law, which shall state, such election commissioner shall have been a qualified elector and a resident of the county at least 2 years prior to appointment.
Is that clear to everyone on the committee? Any further discussion? Okay, we have a motion by Senator Blasey, second by Senator Fasquedo. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. That amendment passes. And we are back on the bill. Any further discussion or amendments? Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't even know where to start here. So I'm going to start with number 1, new section 1. What is the purpose of this, of creating this whole new section?
Turn to Clay Barker for that answer.
Senator, the division of authority between the state and the county on elections is not set out in one place. It's multiple statutes have parts of it. And we constantly get questions, and there's this assumption that the Secretary of State has control over the county elections. and it doesn't. That's why we wanted to make clear the counties run the elections. The Secretary of State, unless there's a specific grant of authority from the legislature, only assists and advises the counties in running the election. And we had a lot of county attorneys ask us to put this in, so in one place, they could point to their county commission and say, this is who does what. This is no change at all in current authority. It just clarifies it because people constantly overestimate the Secretary's authority over county election officers. That was the only reason for it. There's no change in current law or authority.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just don't even know that it's necessary to state this. It doesn't, if it doesn't give the Secretary of State any omnipotent power, then I don't know that it's even necessary to put this language in here. I don't want it to be, you know, misunderstood.
Clay, if you'd like.
And Senator, I understand some people have misunderstood this section. You're correct that it, in a way, it's redundant, that it just restates what's already the law. But because the law was spread out in different statutes, we thought it'd be easier, especially for county attorneys, to have it in one place. That was the goal there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think with our county clerks being duly elected as the election officers in our counties, or for the most part, most of our counties, minus those that have a separate election officer, that I don't believe that this section is necessary, and I would move to strike all of new section 1.
Okay, that's a motion to strike new section 1. Any discussion? Senator Frascado.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. A question for Clay on this issue. So the people that call and make the complaints, so do you find that they call you first, or have they already looked at what's written in the law, or do they contact the county election commissioner first?
Senator, most of them don't read the law. It would be hard to find because the authorities split out in different statutes. It's generally people will say something like, well, a local election, there was a mistake. It's the Secretary of State's fault. And we have to say, we don't tell the counties how to run local elections. They run their elections. Well, where does it say that kind of thing? And also, again, it's the county attorneys asked for this. If we delete it, it won't change anything in current law, Senator Straub. It was just there to help people.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry about that. I would still move to strike this language. I think it's just confusing, and I think it created some heartburn with some of the people watching the hearing, and it would also shorten this 54-page bill. So I would move to strike new section 1.
Okay. Any further discussion? Senator Cluse.
So is, thank you, Mr. Chairman, B reiterated somewhere? I mean, I like the language, sole public officer responsible for planning, conducting, coordinating elections. I don't know, I like the way B reads, but that's my thought.
Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would amend my motion to only strike new section 1A, if that would be more appealing.
Senator Cluse.
Would that help us clear things up for the county people?
Clay, if you'd like to answer that.
I believe so, Senator Cluse. Another issue that comes up occasionally is the division of authority between the county commission and the clerk. Commission sets the budget, the clerk runs the election, the commission then does the canvass, and if they want to do a full hand recount, they can to check the clerk. But sometimes the commission tries to tell the clerk how to run the election, and they have to get the county attorney and sometimes the sheriff involved to say, no, the commission can't tell an independent elected official how to do their job, but they can set the budget. So
Okay.
that amendment would be fine with us, Senator Straub.
Any? Okay. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not to belabor this, but having been a former county commissioner, your county commission is elected to, and they purchase the polling equipment. The county commission actually decides which polling machines to purchase. It is definitely a joint effort when it comes to certain aspects of the election, but I'm fine with the language that would leave the election officer as the sole public officer responsible for planning, conducting, coordinating elections. I think I'm good with that part.
Okay. Any further discussion on this? We have a motion by Senator Straub to strike new section 1A and leave new section 1B as the new section 1. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Blasey. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. I could not tell on that one. Let's do a division. All those in favor say, raise their right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, all those opposed? The ayes have it. That is, the amendment is passed. Back on the bill. Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe yesterday we amended Section 3, correct?
That is correct,
Okay.
we did. Yeah, that regarding the hard drives, correct.
I'm working off my notes here, so trying to make sure we're keeping everything straight. And in that part, does it strike lines 1 and 2 on page 2 out of Section 3?
I'll have Jason look at that. I don't believe it does. I think we just clarified that there has to be a backup before and after an election and before and after a software or firmware update, something that.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, all of the language of new section 3, including lines 1 and 2 on page 2, was retained under that amendment. The committee just created an exception to the general prohibition on creating copies of a hard drive image to direct the county election office to create backup images of hard drives before and after any system updates and before and after each general election.
Senator Straub?
So currently, with the amendment from yesterday, the language from yesterday is just inserted after the period on line 2?
That's correct. It's inserted after line 2 on page 2 as a new subsection to section 3.
Okay. And is all of the language in Section 3 is new, correct?
That's correct.
I think what the concern is from the public is that there would be no way to ever fully audit our elections. And what I really have a concern with is not allowing anyone ever to copy the hard drive of these. I mean, how are you ever to investigate? I know the sheriff has probably received complaints. How would you ever investigate if you are not allowed to copy the hard drive? Except under what we made yesterday as the county clerk shall back up.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know to the extent that the hard drives are used in any auditing process when elections are audited, and I believe there is secured information on the hard drives as to how those machines function, but I'll defer to the Secretary of State's office to clarify.
I think Brian Caskey, if you can clarify on this.
Yes, Senator. It is correct that the hard drives of voting equipment are not auditable in the sense that any third party has access to this. Remembering that elections was deemed critical infrastructure, critical to the nation's security in 2017 by President Obama. President Trump and President Biden have upheld that designation, and so the security of the voting equipment is of utmost importance. Allowing a third-party access to the source code and inner workings of any voting device is not currently permitted, and the Secretary of State would strongly urge you to not do that. If you want to audit the system, we have paper ballots of every single vote cast in every election. After every election, we hand count those through an audit and verify that with the results that are run through the machines. That is how you audit. You look at the actual piece of paper that the voter voted on and compare. So we do believe our systems are entirely auditable. They've been, every election since 2018 has been audited, but we strongly recommend that you keep the sanctity and security of the voting equipment from any outside influence.
Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not suggesting that we allow the alteration of any hard drive, but simply a copy of that to an outside auditing agency in order to see if there is any kind of fraud in our elections. What does current law say? Maybe I should ask the revisor this.
Jason, do you have any comment on that, or Secretary of State's office?
The hard drives are not available for inspection by any outside party due to the sensitive nature of the data contained on those hard drives and the lack of security in handing those over to third parties.
Okay, then what does new Section 3 do that, does that, if they're not currently available, what's the purpose of new Section 3?
New Section 3 is actually directed to the county election offices and their employees and agents themselves, the ones who are actually in possession of the hard drives, and prevents them from creating any hard drive image or permitting any other person to do so. It clarifies what their responsibilities are with respect to the hard drive images, and if there's further clarification from the Secretary of State's office, I'll defer to them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. One more thing on this. You know, I think we have lots of other examples in private business where individuals have access to sensitive information or sensitive data, and we do have instances where people have to speak up and become, in essence, a whistleblower. This, I think, could potentially hinder our elected county clerks from blowing the whistle when they think there might be an issue with the machine, and the only way for them to prove that and save that information would be to copy the hard drive of that voting equipment. I don't believe that the new Section 3 is necessary. The previous language without the written consent of the Secretary of State, because it sounds like we're giving sole authority to the Secretary of State to copy the hard drive of voting equipment. That's just how I understand the statute. Someone can correct me if they think it reads differently.
I don't know if Jason, you'd like to comment, or Secretary of State?
The amendment that was adopted by the committee requires backup copies be made without consent of the Secretary of State. It directs the county election officers to create those backup copies at those particular times without any approval by the Secretary of State.
I would assume that the county election official, if they thought there were some problems, could bring in an auditor and do it with the backups that they have available. Clay, would you like to respond to that? Or how would that process happen if there were concerns about, if there were some malware or something like that?
Senator, if a county election officer had a concern about a machine, they could either talk to our office, they could go to a county attorney, they could go to law enforcement, the attorney general. What this was meant to prevent is the rogue employee who rationalizes why it's okay to take a secure hard drive that has secure information on it, put it out in the public, and the next thing you know, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians have it because they think they're trying to do a public benefit. There are ways to get the equipment checked through law enforcement, Secretary of State, if you don't trust the Secretary of State, Attorney General. But rogue employees have happened in other states, and it has caused a problem. It's a real problem. Never happened in Kansas yet, but we wanted to get out in front of it. And that's why this is here. Also, on third-party audits, elections are so odd. They're rare, and each state does it differently, that you rarely have a third party that has any expertise in auditing elections. It's just not a business model that makes a lot of sense for companies, unlike in, say, accounting, where there's general accounting forms for the entire country are the same.
Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what the public sees currently is that we already have a third party involved in our elections, and those are the people who program the software for voting equipment or program the hard drive for the voting equipment. I think we could make the language in this section a little bit better by simply removing after component on line 1 on page 2, remove without the written consent of the Secretary of State. And that way, it just clarifies that no person shall make or permit any other person to create or disclose that information. But it leaves out the without the written consent of the Secretary of State.
Comment on that, Clay?
Senator, that was put in there just so if a county says, we have a problem and we need to do this, Mr. Caskey, who has a top secret clearance and works at the Fusion Center sometimes, can say, yes, go ahead and do it in those circumstances. That was more to help the counties out. Instead of having a blanket prohibition, it's kind of, if you need an exception, we'll give it to you after we look at your facts and circumstances.
So what you're saying is when it's okay with the Secretary of State, a person would be permitted to make a copy of the hard drive?
Yes, and there's also the new, yes, Senator, and plus the new amendment creates a whole series of copies of the hard drives where it's required.
Well, in that case, we're giving sole authority to one person to determine when it's okay and when it isn't okay to make copies of the hard drive of the equipment, right?
Well, Senator, there will be statutorily required copies, and then if a county needs an exception, you would just essentially go to the Secretary of State, present your facts and circumstances, individuals who understand the system would say, in that case, it's okay, go ahead. Then the county's covered because they've gone a little outside the law or what the law normally would require, and we'd make sure that in those circumstances it's okay to make the copy, that it's properly secured and done in the correct manner.
I'm just not even sure now what the stance of the Secretary of State's office is, because what they're saying is it's okay to copy it. It's okay to make a copy when the Secretary of State's office says it's okay to make a copy. Is new Section 3 even necessary then? Except that we amended it yesterday, making new Section 3 only the amendment from yesterday and striking all of the language that's in the copy that we have.
I think there might be a security issue with striking from the way I read it, because we don't want copies floating around out there. And if we leave the statute that we make a backup copy, but say that no one can make a copy out, then you've got some backup copies somebody could interpret as they could be floating around out there. That's kind of how I interpret it.
So in an attempt to help clarify this language requires county election officers to make a copy of the hard drives. That is not currently a requirement. Some counties do, some counties do not. This law requires every county to make a copy of every hard drive and have it in their possession. The part that includes the Secretary of State is a release of that hard drive to anyone else that's not the vendor or the county, specifically any third party, because of security concerns. Any access to that hard drive gives a third party unfiltered access to the source code and programming of any piece of voting equipment. That is a huge security risk. This is critical infrastructure. This is not private business. Our security concerns are much greater than private business. So that's what this bill does. We think the copies of the hard drives at the county level, absolutely, have copies on site. But the release of those copies is what we are most concerned about, not the actual existence of the copies.
Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would assume that our county clerks are upholding their oath of office, which is clearly stated in Section 1, Section 1B, that the county election officer shall be the sole public officer. I don't see the necessity of new Section 3 in giving that without the written consent of the Secretary of State. I don't see the necessity of that because our county clerks are duly elected.
Any further discussion? Committee, we have about 10 minutes, so I do want to try to wrap it up in the next 10 minutes if we can. Senator Blasey?
I was just going to say, it appears, based on the amendment, that if there is the need for an audit, outside audit of whatever you call it, a forensic audit or whatever they call it, the Secretary of State then is the office that can release that to a certified auditor. Is that correct, more or less? I mean, instead of having each county do whatever they want, that's why it's kind of put in place like this? Okay.
Any other discussion? Seeing none? Did you have another? Okay, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving to Section 6 on line 21, so page 3, line 21, where the county is stricken and the state is entered, I would move to revert back to the county.
Okay, that's a conceptual amendment. Any discussion on that? Senator Fasquedo?
Could you please repeat that and clarify?
On page 3, section 6, line 21, where the county, the qualified elector of the county, and the county is stricken and this state is entered. I think it's important that the clerk, that the electors that are of that county, not of the state of Kansas, because different counties have different needs, different constituencies. So I don't think that serves each county well to have somebody who's just a qualified elector in the state. I believe they should be a qualified elector of that county.
Senator Longvine?
What would happen if you didn't have a qualified person that lived in the county? Or you had someone that wanted to move from a neighboring county into the county?
Then they could move into the county and then be elected.
So you wouldn't have a clerk if you didn't have a qualified person?
I believe most counties have a deputy clerk. Do they not? Are they required to?
Clay?
Okay, Senator, this provision was put in at the request of multiple county clerks and parties. The county clerk does not need to be a resident of the county to be the county clerk. So they can live anywhere in Kansas and be elected as the county clerk. For some reason, if there's a vacancy in the county clerk and the precinct leaders have to elect the replacement has to be from the county. And especially in a lot of smaller rural counties, I was told it would help them a lot if they could recruit maybe from neighboring counties and have someone come in. That there are times they just can't find someone who wants the job. It's a pretty hot seat sometimes. And it just helps if they can go to the 8 neighboring counties and look for someone. That's why that's here. We weren't trying to change anything, and it's similar to the next provision with the sheriffs. That was another request from rural counties. But that's why that's there, Senator.
Senator Blasey?
So for clarification, Clay, you're saying current law is we have county clerks for counties in Kansas that don't live in the county, yet they stand before the electors? How does that work? I mean, clearly, I guess you just sign up, I'm going to run for, I can live in Sedgwick, but I'm going to run to be the county clerk in Greeley County? Senator,
it's county clerks, county attorneys. There's several positions where being a resident of the county is not a statutory requirement to run. I think it would help in the election to be a resident, but at least know the area.
Okay, any further discussion? Senator Straub?
I would move that we revert back to current law. I think current law is actually working, and I understand sometimes there are needs in small counties, but that this does not prohibit them from recruiting someone from another county and getting them to move into their county and then electing them.
So do you move your motion? Oh, Clay, did you have one last bit of discussion?
Mr. Chairman, we're running out of time. Senator, to respond to that, the problem was you may have a clerk in another county that says, I'd be happy to move into the county. Precinct leaders elect me first. And the precinct leaders say, well, we can't elect you until you move first. And the person doesn't want to move until they know they have the job. It's like putting the cart before the horse on them.
Senator Blasey?
Would the carrier potentially maybe then be willing to say qualified elector of a bordering county? So one of the counties that border that county, or would you prefer to keep it in?
Or to keep it in? So do you move your motion?
I would move my motion just to keep current law, yes.
Is there a second? Second by Senator Blasey. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The motion fails. Back on the bill. Any further discussion or amendments? Senator Holscher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I was online and when the first amendment was handled, and I do have concerns over the changes made to Section 27. Excuse me, but beyond that, I am curious with all the amendments that were made yesterday, do we have updated fiscal note or impact as far as what this bill now looks like?
Let's see. I don't know if there's a fiscal note per se that's been concocted on this, but Brian, would you like to speak to that?
Yes, Senator. We have not yet provided a current fiscal note because I was waiting on the outcome of today's action. Most of these things will not have a fiscal impact. The one that might has to do with the hard drives because this mandates that every county produce hard drives of everything. There will be a cost to that because not every county currently does that. I do not have accurate fiscal information on that yet. But after a brief review, I believe that's the only big fiscal note except for changing the population on county election offices from 130,000 to 100,000. The County of Douglas will have a fiscal impact in creating a completely new county election office separate from the county clerk. I, quite frankly, would defer to the county on that cost, but that is, I mean, there is money behind that. Those are the two things off the top of my head that would have any kind of fiscal impact.
Further discussion. Senator Blasey?
I have another amendment, if unless we're still on the previous subject.
No, we're not. Yeah.
Clay, I don't know if you're, or sorry, Jason, you're able to get clarity on the primary write-in, on whether or not it's allowed.
No, but the Secretary of State's office is here about whether or not there are write-in candidates on primary elections.
There are no write-in blanks on partisan primary elections. The purpose of a primary, remember, is for each party to select their candidate name to go on the general election ballot. So if there is a candidate who has filed, there is no write-in blank because the presumption is the person who filed will be that party's nominee. If there is no candidate for that party, hypothetically for U.S. Senate, if the Republican Party did not run a candidate, there would be a write-in blank, and then there's a threshold of votes that would have to be received for that write-in to be printed on the general election ballot. But for partisan primary elections, there is never a write-in when a person has filed for office.
Well, I'd like to make a motion, I don't know if we can do this conceptually though, but that primary ballots, all primary elections do have the capacity to be a write-in because we had an instance, once the filing deadline passed, we had Republicans doing things that were just, anyway. So the point is there was no process for Republicans to try to do a nomination for somebody else because the filing deadline had already filed and they couldn't do a write-in for the August election. So I would just make a motion that primary elections would have write-in capacities. And if the person nominated is not a registered member of that party, then they shall not qualify and move on to the general election.
Jason, where would we? I guess you'd have to think about that. Okay.
Well, then I'll withdraw it at this time. I know you guys are moving quickly, but my last thing is Section 26. We're removing the auditing of parties, state parties, the two major parties. Right now, there's a feud within the Republican Party about auditing financials. So I'm just curious why that's being stricken. Thank you.
That would be page 21, section 26. Is that what you're talking about, Senator Blasey?
Senator, that provision has not been enforced since 1974 because the next line down in the statute says if the party falls under the Campaign Finance Act, which both political parties do, then we don't have to do the old certified audits. And that's when the law was passed in 1974. And we get questions, and so does governmental ethics. Where are the certified audits? And we have to walk them through the statute. And that line probably should have been removed in 74. It might have been left in as a carryover as the new system was being put in place. But that's just to help voters understand the system and not ask for something that no longer exists. And governmental ethics wants that out also.
Okay, so then really there is no formal requirement to audit the party. The parties don't have to audit them, unless they do it themselves.
They can do it themselves, but they have to file the campaign finance reports. That's where the information is supposed to be. Back in '74, there was no online reporting or things like that.
Any other further questions or discussion? Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I have a question. In the event of a vacancy in the county clerk's position or in a sheriff's office, who are the people who are to fill those positions temporarily until a new sheriff or county clerk could be elected?
Ryan Caskey?
So I'm not an expert on county government, but when there's a vacancy in office, like an immediate vacancy, there's no one that's appointed as a temporary. It just remains vacant until the precinct committee members select a name that's forwarded to the governor for official appointment. There's not a temporary office holder. It just remains vacant until the vacancy is filled by appointment. So the offices continue to run, but there's not anointed a temporary county clerk. It's just vacant until filled by appointment.
Maybe I should clarify. I believe there is something in statute that if there were a vacancy in the sheriff's position, that the county clerk assumes those administrative, I guess, kind of responsibilities. Is that correct? Something?
There's something like that. I need to talk to Jason and kind of clarify that. It's a situation where the sheriff is vacant and there's no undersheriff. And in that specific situation, if there's no sheriff and no undersheriff, the county clerk will temporarily assume duties until such time as those are appointed. I need to talk to Jason and clarify that, but that is correct. But both of those things have to happen. The sheriff is vacant and there is no undersheriff.
So that kind of leads me back to Section 6 and Section 7. Those are with how we elect our county clerks and sheriffs. So I think this is going to take a little more research and a little more time before I have an actual amendment prepared for that. Are we planning to meet again?
That wasn't, the plan was to try to allay any concerns today. And, we've amended an awful lot here. I believe that for the sake of time, we're going to have to either move on this bill or adjourn. So I would, like to try to see if we can get the will of the committee on this bill. Obviously, there might be some more deep dives that need to be done on some of these sections that I think we can perhaps consider another bill to fix those issues. But at this point, I'd like to see if we could go for the will of the committee on the actual bill. Senator Longmire?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we pass out HB 2086 as amended favorably for passage.
Is there a second? Second by Senator Reichman. Discussion? Senator Straub?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think there are still a number of issues, and we can go through all of these issues here in committee to save the time of the whole body, or it is very likely that I will have a dozen amendments for the Senate floor. I think we just have to be very, very careful. This bill was not introduced in the normal manner that we introduce bills and work bills. It also covers far more statutes than most bills do. It's 54 pages long. I have had more emails and phone calls about this bill than any other bill this session. It has created a lot of heartburn for a lot of people, and I think it would not be wise of us to rush this bill through and send it to the Senate floor. I just don't believe it's ready for it.
Any other discussion? Senator Fasquedo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I, too, on 2086 is the most emails I received all session, and over the weekend, I got phone calls, neighbors outside talking about it. And Mr. Chairman, if Jason could give me a copy of the amendment that you passed before I arrived, Senator Straub and I were in the parking lot together, but darn, I stopped at the restroom. So I missed that, and because I would not have supported this. And so anyway, I have concerns as well coming from multiple constituents, Republican and Democratic constituents on this issue. So I agree with some of the amendments that the Secretary of State has made, but this one here that affects voters with disabilities, I don't agree with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Senator Clues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been a little back and forth on this along the journey. But I do think there's some things within this bill that are important as we look at moving the presidential primary up as well. And I'm not so sure that it won't hurt to have some debate or amendments on the floor to fix this. I have had quite a number of people reach out to me as well. And, you know, the challenge we have is we have a lot of personalities involved here, and yet getting the right policy out. We do have bills. It seems like things are rushed sometimes, and but that's the nature of what we deal with. And so I'm sensing we need to get this thing out, get it on the floor, get it dealt with, and I don't know how many more meetings we can have this session. Otherwise, we could be looking at getting in the next session.
Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ranking minority member said something about disabilities was impacted in a previous amendment. Can she allude to what amendment she's talking about? Because my understanding is that there's no such amendment.
Well, it was regarding removing individuals from the voting. If you could clarify what that amendment was.
Mr. Chairman, most of the individuals on the permanent advance voting list are individuals with a disability.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we have a motion by Senator Longbine and a second by Senator Reichman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes appear to have it. The bill has passed. Oh, we can have division? Yes, we can have a division. All those in favor, raise your right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. All those opposed? No. 1, 2, 3, 4. The chair votes to move it out of committee. We can always amend and continue to work on this, and I appreciate your work. I think we vetted this pretty handily, and I appreciate the work, and obviously there's going to continue to be some work on this. Thank you all. We are adjourned.